All right, welcome back. So it's time to talk about the patch notes. I went over them. We did that live on Twitch, where we just went through everything quickly and just like read what was happening. And I have since then kind of cooked down because it's a lot, right? Like, let me just show you guys. This is the patch notes, which is um, quite a read. There is a lot of things here, right? Which is pretty obvious that there's just so much stuff. And I kind of went through and I picked out the things that I feel like matters the most and the biggest like changes and stuff. And then of course there's like a really massive amount of changes to certain things, kind of like skill tree, gems, and for instance unique items, right? Like look at these. This is just changes to unique items right here. All of this is just different changes to unique items. So I'm not going to go over each one of those. I might here and there highlight an item or a gem or something if there's something to say about it, you know what I mean? Like if I feel like, okay, this is like kind of like important information. But yeah, so I thought let me just cook all of this down to like a lot more palatable size. So I have written down like basically everything that's like I feel like it's very important here. So we're gonna go over those things. I'm just kind of gonna read from this script that I wrote because it's I'm trying to make sure that I'm like pointing out the things that I feel like is important to me. Um, so yeah, without further ado, like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more, and let's get into it. So we have first and foremost, I kind of want to talk about rangers. So ranger being the pathfinder, being the deadeye, but also kind of like our like ritualist and Amazon, right? Like that's kind of the. It's not the same character, but it's like those are falling into the same area of the tree, right? But I want to start with the Rangers first and foremost, just because that's what I mainly played last league. Is the Abyss League? You can see here. I mainly played this Ranger right here, which was incredibly good, right? Like that's it's just it was really fast, insane clear speed, giant AoE. Like there's so many good things about it, right? And to be honest, we are catching a little bit of a nerf to Rangers in general in terms of like some things has changed here. So first and foremost, we have Wind Ward is now gone. And what that did was it would give you 3% less damage per tailwind stack. And you could have up to 10 stacks basically. So um, but tailwind stays. So basically, tailwind is like it'll give you 1% movement speed, 3% skill speed, and 15% evasion rating per stack, and then you can have up to 10 stacks. So that's 10% movement speed, it's 30% skill speed, and it's 150% evasion rating. So that stays the way it basically is, kind of like, and to be honest, that is very very powerful. Just having more movement speed in this game in terms of making currency, I feel like is a very it's like one of those factors that makes it so you can clear more content faster, even if you aren't like a giant AOE build. Because I also played this last laminate build from oh, what was his name, Soulsword or something like that. I can't fully remember, but yeah. So I tried this out, and again, this kind of also has like a high movement speed, and it feels really good. It does not have quite the AOE that the Ranger does, but it doesn't really matter because it has the movement speed, so it feels really, really, really good. I also played this Witch Hunter build I made here, which also has like a decent amount of AoE, but it's just that the movement speed is really good on it. So clear speed automatically becomes good, and that just feels really good when you're like going faster the map. Um, so yeah, them changing us getting like basically being able to take more damage is fine for me because I already had like I want to say like 1500 health and 4000 ES on this, so it really didn't feel like I would die that often. I just the only thing I really died to was like super one hit things, And yeah, it just didn't happen much. It felt, because of the speed, I was able to like kind of evade a lot of things and like move around enemies and make sure I'm not getting hit. Like it's an overall good feel, I feel like. And to like highlight another thing here is, due to some of the nerfs we are getting, Roa seems stronger than ever, honestly. So currently, you get a better extra movement speed when you're riding the Roa. That has been removed, but in turn, like the counter to that is basically giving us more reduced movement speed penalty, so we can now move faster while we actually shoot. And that is gonna feel insane. Now it's 100%, so basically no penalty, right? And before it was 80. So you felt like a little bit of a slowdown when you fired your bow, for instance. And honestly, I wouldn't mind being able to use spells and crossbows on a Roa. I feel like if you can use a two-handed bow while riding it, just in terms of like, you're using two hands to fire your crossbow, right? You're using two hands to fire your bow, but you're only using one hand to fire your spells. So it kind of seems like why can't I hold on to the Roa with the other hand and shoot my spells, right? Because that's just, I guess, like, it's not thematically right, but it still kind of feels weird to me. But this movement speed change kind of means that it's more of a buff than a nerf, by like lowering the movement speed on the Roa and then giving us less penalty for using our skills on while we're riding it, and then removing that from the rune section, which we're gonna get to. But just that change alone affects every character, right? So this seems like the better choice now, honestly. And I wasn't using a Roa on this. Like, I didn't build my ranger to have like a Roa. I built mine to use a companion instead. I like that better, so that's how I built mine out. And yeah, I might actually do a ranger this time, because it just it seems really good, man. I'm not gonna lie. And with some of the other changes, it just seems this could be top of the played characters again, honestly, to be fair. I could see that. Also because they didn't nerf lightning arrow per se, they nerfed the lightning rod, so we can only put like 10 rods instead of 20. And with the amount of damage we're doing with the lightning arrow right now, I'm rarely ever using the rods unless I'm killing like a boss or something, right? So in terms of map speed clear, it seems like it's gonna stay roughly the same for the ranger, and then a lot of other builds are gonna be a little bit slower, and we're gonna have less pack size, so there's less monsters to kill. So I might be even able to complete the map even faster now. So yeah, I do see a little bit of a movement speed issue, because there's still some kind of like just disparity. And I get that Deadeye should feel fast and all, but should it feel so much faster than every other character in the game? I can't really answer that, because I haven't really played around with too many like slow builds lately. I just really don't necessarily enjoy that too much. But this is, well, this is kind of the league to do that now, I feel like, because there's like, try something that might not be as fast, because they're like pushing down the pack size a little bit, so there's a bigger incentive to do something that has high damage and just doesn't necessarily has the biggest AoE, right? As long as everything just instant dies, it probably will feel a lot better in that terms. But I don't know if I agree with the change to the rune with the movement penalty, because that does affect a lot of different builds. We're getting a Mirage Deadeye Ascendancy point, which, yes, we are. So basically we're losing those rods, right? But I feel like that Mirage might make up for that in clear speed, because you're gonna basically fire you're firing double the amount of arrows now with that, instead of you yourself firing them. Now you just have a copy of yourself firing at the same time that you're firing. So it just, off the top of my head, it seems like that would provide more clear speed. I'm not entirely sure how it would like work out once we get into it. We'll have to wait and see how that functions. Luckily, that's something I can instantly jump on, do on my Ranger, and just swap that 1 point, and then see how that feels. Right? That's an easy test. So I feel like a lot of these things needs some testing, and then from there we can give our feedback. And if it's super bad, they'll probably just change it. And if it's pretty good, then it'll probably stay, and they'll just adjust certain things, right? Now, Pathfinder is definitely getting a lot of love this time. So again, you can use the Broa on Pathfinder. You could use it on Amazon. You could use it on Ritualist. You can use it on your Deadeye, right? Like those all work really good with like Lightning Spear or like Lightning Arrow. Also, you could technically use it on your mercenaries, even on your monk if you wanted to, and all of them really start in a starting area with that potential playstyle is not too bad, right, as a starter. So I do see a lot of potential in that. But yeah, as I said, Pathfinder is definitely getting a lot of love this time. I feel like it's very interesting, having damage, global defenses, and efficiency cost as your as your attribute points. Like you can pick between those as well as the attributes. That seems very powerful to me. I could see basically I could imagine that my curse bot might change into a Pathfinder, instead of being on the Chronomancer, just because of how like there's a lot of defense to be had there, and there's a lot of efficiency cost and stuff like that, and all those things kind of fall in line with that build currently, right? So we'll just have to wait and see, man. It's a little bit hard to pinpoint just how good this is going to be, but I feel like it's going to be really good, right? I feel like this might be, I kind of feel like this might be a little bit too good, but it's hard to tell. And then on top of that, we're also getting a ascendancy point, which is called Running Assault. It now grants cannot be heavy stunned while sprinting. So what that means basically is that while you're sprinting, if you get hit by an enemy now, you automatically fall over and roll over, and you have to wait for your characters to stand up. That will not be a thing, and that's another reason why I feel like the curse bot on that might actually be really good, because now I can just hold down sprint and just sprint around everywhere, and I'm not gonna fall over. And that just gives me a lot of speed to keep up and be up in front and then curse everything immediately. And then with having the global defenses, that would give me a lot of defenses. So just it seems really strong as a curse bot to me. And then of course you can get the damage as well. So if you want to make a damage build, this seems also really strong, right? Like it just seems like it has like a lot of potential. Ritualist is getting a couple of changes too, which I really like. So personally for me, Ritualist has like a couple of things that you can do with it that's really good on the DPS side. But honestly, for me, what I really like with the Ritualist is using it as a rarity bot in group play, because of how good it actually is. That's exactly what my current Ritualist is. If I go down here, where are you? There you are. So this is basically a curse bot, and a lot of the things that was changed in 02 and 03 that made this maybe a little bit worse is kind of like, for instance, the shield, right? And that is getting changed back to a better point, which I will touch on later. But there's so many things with this build that just works out really well, and the coverage of so I'm using the gloves that makes all kills count as if I was the one killing them, and then I have like 500 something magic find or rarity, and then with having the amount of coverage I do on the screen, so basically my coverage is not just full screen, it's way off of screen too. It's basically 2 screens away. So anybody killing an enemy within 2 screens of me is getting my magic find, which is just, or like my rarity. That is insane already. And then I like something I did to it was I added a couple of curses to it as well because I had a bunch of leftover spirit. So I was thinking, what do I do? And I added blasphemy and a couple of curses to it, and that just turned into work really, really well. I use temporal change and enfeeble, so that way we take a little bit less damage and the monsters is a bit slower, right? Like that just kind of helps everybody in the group, no matter what type of character you play. So yeah, that's I do see this being really, really, really good again as a rarity bot on group play. And there's, of course, as I said, there's a plenty of DPS things you can do with the ritualist as well. That's really, really good. And the changes we're getting is that now the mini headhunter node is really going to be good, right? Because beforehand I tried it, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of sucks, right? Because you have the buff for like 20 seconds basically, and given how often you then have to stop and do the visual mechanic of like cutting your hand and getting the modifier from the rare monsters, it just didn't seem like something I kind of wanted to do because it constantly slowed down the progression of the map. So for that reason, I didn't like that specific point before. But now it's getting buffed from like 20 seconds up to like between 82 and 120 seconds. So basically, you have the mod for 2 minutes, which is double the amount of what the headhunter is. The headhunter is like 60 seconds, if I remember correctly. So that is really, in my opinion, that is really good, man. That is really, really good. And not only that, you're getting the quality on the if you get the quality on there, it says that the quality is now 20 seconds on the modifier, like the stolen modifier duration, whereas before it was only 2. So now it's like 140 seconds, right? And it seems way more usable in group play now, and especially as a rarity bot, you're just gaining that extra constant modifier, and that could be speed, that could be extra ES, that could be a bunch of different things that's very defensive. It could also be something offensive that you can't technically use, and that's fine too. Like, it shouldn't be all just perfectly for me, right? So I really, really like this ritualist. I think there is a lot of potential to make a rarity bot here and then have a ton of good times. Next up, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the warriors. And so there is some changes here, right? And the biggest changes are definitely to the Smith of Katava, because that thing, it was like really good. I don't know if I want to say it was really good. It was good, then it became a little bit bad, and now it's back to being what I would consider good again, right? So there's so many like smaller changes to it, and I'm not gonna go over them because if you want to read like every single change, I'll leave a link for the actual patch notes in the description of the video. But yeah, still, the kind of like nerf to movement penalty might be a little bit of a problem for clear speed in the warrior section in general. I feel like they benefited a lot from having the reduced movement speed penalty runes inside of their gear, just being able to move faster in any type of capacity when you're already getting a bunch of movement penalties from wearing armor gear seems a little bit rough to remove that, because now we're back to moving, I wouldn't say slow, right? Because it's still faster than what it was back beforehand, like in 01. But it definitely is taking a little bit off the top on the just in general movement, and that in terms means a little bit less clear speed, right? And that's just a common theme throughout every single build, right? Except for the like the rangers and whatnot that uses Roa. That's basically where I'm at with that. And for the Warbringer, it's not getting much of a change. There's a little bit of a buff to Ancestral Warhorn minion, and Imploding Impact is now now also grants fully broken armor you inflict increases all damage taken from hits instead of like just breaking the armor below 0. I think that's a minute change. It's definitely in a better direction. For Titan, we are losing the node that's called Surprising Strength. And then it has been moved into the previous point, and then it's now, instead of 50% more damage against heavy stunned enemies, it's now just 25, so that got kind of halved. And that's fine too, because they did do a lot of damage, especially through the campaign and stuff. And yeah, I'm not too unhappy with that. I'm pretty happy with that. They then added a new one instead of the Surprising Strength, which is called Mountain Splitter Ascendancy Point, and this grants every third slam doesn't create a fissure, which you yourself causes an additional aftershock on each side of where you just basically slammed, right? So that does seem interesting. I am not entirely sure what the complete impact of that is going to be yet, but that might be really, really good, or it might just be mid, right? It's definitely not a bad thing, that's for sure. I feel like this is a pretty positive thing because it does provide a little bit more AoE, right? So I do like the idea. And as I said, like the Smith of Kataba just has a slew of smaller changes, and if you're really interested, you should definitely go look at the patch notes. Alright, so next up we have The Witch, which is, again, that's something I just played. I have played multiple witches, and it's still, in my opinion, among the strongest ascendancies in the game. And there's a good reason for that. It's because it has 3 different ascendants, right? So you have the Lich, you have the Blood Mage, and you have the Infernalist. And if we started at Lich, it stays the same, but it is already exceptionally strong. Basically, like, I just did this crossbow build, but I also have a chaos dot version of a Lich here, which is also insanely strong. I really like that. I like that character a lot, and I feel like it's really, really good in single play, like in solo play. It's a little bit less good in group play, but it is just incredibly good in single play, again, solo play, and I really, really, really freaking like that. And there's a lot of potential here with this ascendancy in itself. It has a lot of different possibilities of things you can do. And then next up we have the Blood Mage, which there's also not really any change to. Blood Mage, I haven't played that since 01 because this was the best build I've ever played in the game, basically. It's my favorite build, right? It's nothing, like, I can't really use this build anymore the same way I did in 01 because it's nowhere near the power it was. But it was insanely fun to play. And that doesn't matter that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that, just for me personally, I hadn't really gotten back into the Blood Mage, although it's my favorite character. But I also kind of want to test everything out, so that's one of the reasons I didn't get back into it, because I feel like it's so strong of an ascendancy that I didn't want to go back into it right away. I kind of want to like wait a little bit to see if they change some things that makes it a little bit less strong, because I feel like in 02, in 03, Blood Mages was just incredibly strong in general. It's a phenomenal, like in damage, it's phenomenal, right? And it's phenomenal for solo, but it's also phenomenal in a group setting. And that's what makes this ascendancy really, really strong, is you have like the Lich, which is super in solo, then you have the Blood Mage, which is super in solo and in group play, and then you have the Infernalist. The Infernalist has basically multiple afflictions that you can like play, or different types of play styles you can play with it. You can do minions, you could do the spell situation, the demon form, and all that stuff. And honestly, I feel like the Infernalist is just very, very strong too. Like, Infernalist is incredible strength that you can pull out of that build, like just power, right, from the ascendancy itself. And it also has a very, very decent amount of defense you can pull out of it on top of it, so it just becomes very tanky and has a lot of power, and it's just that's why I really think that like Witch in general is just such a strong starter, because there's so much different stuff you can do. There's so many different skills you can use. And yeah, even though we are getting a little bit of a change here, so they're gonna change specters, right? And now we don't have the full patch notes for specters at all. We don't know really anything about them yet. But one thing we do know is that we'll no longer be able to use the ants, which is what I just played this league with my Infernalist in Abyssal League before I swapped into the Lich build. I played a absolutely goated Spectre build where I used these ants, and they were really incredible. Like, I really liked them in comparison to the Velguards, because it was so much less eye cancer. It was so much more smooth running. It did a lot of damage. You might never, like, you didn't have a lot of them. I had 5, right? So it wasn't like I had like a ton of Spectres running around with me, but it was enough to feel like it was really powerful. And it felt really good to play. I really like those. I'm a little sad that they have disabled the ability to use them as a Spectre. I think they'll come back at some point. I just think they kind of want to have us test all the other Spectres, right? In order to give people a feeling where they feel like they need to go test stuff. You kind of have to remove that, because otherwise like 90% of people would just play the ants again, you know what I mean? Like, that's just how it is, because how good they were. But it also kind of fucks up a little bit on other builds too. So for instance, with my ranger this league, I also, since I'm using a companion with him or with her, I had to go find a beast that I really wanted, that had the right aura and the right like setup of mods. And you know what beast I went to go get? Obviously a ant. And the reason behind that is the movement speed of the ants was really good. So when I have this high of a movement speed on my character, the ant actually follows me around like easily, right? Like, it's not like it's constantly going into the spirit form and then trying to catch up with me, or like being like off screen and not giving me the benefits. It's constantly there with me, and that just felt really good as a tamed beast. But we won't be able to tame them as a beast either anymore. That part I'm not in. I just don't know if I agree with that part. I think you should still be able to tame them as a beast. I don't think they're OP as a beast per se. They're just really good, and they're a little bit better than the monkey, for instance, like the quad monkey that has like 4 arms, right? But that is still just really good too. So it was kind of like up in the air what you like the most. Then we have the sorceress, which we did see some changes to the Stormweaver here, which was definitely needed. Smaller changes, nothing like, I don't feel like there was anything major changed here. It's just a little adjustment on the knobs, you could say, turning them up a little bit, which is definitely needed. I feel like that was probably one of the weaker ascendancies, and it kind of went from being one of the strongest to like just a lot weaker for some reason. But that has a lot to do with skills and changes to skills and stuff like that. I played that as my very first character back in 01, and that was incredibly strong early on. Like, it was just crazy good. Then we have the Chronomancer, which I personally feel like is a really good ascendancy. There's like a couple of things you can do with it. You can do some cast on spells. You can do a handful of different things. But currently, what I do is this is one of my support builds, one of my group setting builds. I feel like it's so strong as a curse bot. And we are seeing a little bit of a buff here to the inevitable agony, and yeah, it's a bit of a change, but honestly, it's not something that I would personally use, since I rather want to use it as a curse bot in a group setting, right? And that's where I feel like it shines the most, and you have so much utility, so many things you can do. You have the stop time. You have the freeze time, and you have the ability to go back in time basically. So if you get really hard hit, you can just hit that button and you can immediately get all your ES back. And I'm playing as a CI build, right? So I can just instant get my ES back if I get hit. I have a button where I can refresh everything, right? It's like all my skills. So even though there's a massive like timer on your freeze time, like to use it again afterwards, there's a cooldown time that's really, really big. I can just use the button that instant cooldown, that removes the cooldown basically instantly. And I can then freeze time like twice in a row instantaneously. And with the new changes to how we can put multiple support gems of the same kind into different skills, that really gave this build even more, like just more utility basically. And I really, really like that. So I still feel like, it's my personal opinion, of course, but I still feel like Chronomancer is definitely up there in terms of a group setting, right? Like it's just one of the best support builds, in my opinion. Especially if you're running like, so the setup I prefer to do in a group setting would be one rarity bot on a ritualist, we have the curse bot on the Chronomancer, and then we have a bannerman on the tactician. And you run those three, and then you have 2 or 3 DPS builds, and that's it, right? That's basically it. That situation works out really well, and I played that like a handful of times now, like with a group, and then it just feels incredibly. We all like it all feels like we're moving together, and it's really, really strong in that setup. Now for mercs, so Gemin Legionnaire went from probably being the #1 build in 01, if we were to talk about clear speed. It was the stat stacker was crazy how fast that shit was, right? It got nerfed somewhat heavily, I would say, in 02, I believe, and then it caught like kind of a nerf in 03, if I remember correctly. It changed a little bit there. And then they are buffing it a little bit, but the buffs they're giving it this time it's not something that brings me to say, oh, I definitely want to play the Gemling again. So yeah, not too much of a change, not really worth talking about with the Gemling this time. In terms of the tactician, which is something that I really, really, really loved, I made an incredible build for this guy, and I felt like that was one of the better builds that entire season, just due to how many people were playing the same exact thing. They were all playing like Amazons or Rangers with the Lightning Spear, and I didn't want to play that. I did play that, but I just didn't want to continuously play that. So I chose to go a completely different way and make a full-on support build where all I do was using banners. That worked out incredibly well enough to where they nerfed the living shit out of it, to be honest. And now I do see a potential for it to come back, and that's due to a couple of things, something that I will highlight later. But it's just, again, I'm up in the air here because I think this will take a lot of investment to get to that point, but we'll just have to wait and see how it goes, man. The Witch Hunter, I personally just played the Witch Hunter this league, which, man, so here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a Witch Hunter which was utilizing a crossbow, and then either a spell type caster situation on my second hand, or like a heavy like mace single target damage type situation. And although the change to the 100 weapon passives, what I think was a crazy good change, it was super cool. The reality of it is you aren't really able to play two separate styles at the same time. Like you can't really play crossbows with maces or crossbows with wands, for instance, right? And the reason you can't really do that, in my opinion, is because we just do not have the skill slots to do that. There's just not enough open skills open skill slots to put skills in to like truly take advantage of playing two separate builds at the same time type deal. So I do honestly still think that they should change that. And I have given a couple of suggestions to how you could change that, which I think would be, if they did that, would be very cool. But yeah, it's not a lot of changes here either, right? Like, it's just generally the mercs didn't see too much of a change this go around, and I'm fine with that because there's definitely still some utility there. There's still some things that work really well. For the monk, yeah, so we have the invoker. They're getting a little bit of buff, right? But if we compare some of the changes to some of the other classes, for instance, like Pathfinder or other stuff, the changes to the monks are just not really too much. There's not too much of a big change here. It's more just a turning of the knob, and that goes for the Acolyte of Tula as well, which doesn't really see any changes other than the like it's purely a numbers change, right? It's just turning up the knobs and giving a little bit more outputs of certain notes on the ascendancy tree. So not a lot to talk about or not a lot to talk about when it comes to the monks. And then we have the druid, which of course is really, really, really impossible to tell how that's going to function because we haven't actually had it in our hands playing it. So you can speculate and say certain things are going to be good, certain things are going to be bad or whatever. But until we really test it, it's going to be hard to fully tell what, like, how big is these changes really going to be, right? Like, how well is it going to perform doing the shape-shifting on a druid versus doing it on a ranger, for instance, or whatever, right? Because druid might not be the best kind of build archetype for a shapeshifter. It might even be that the spells from the druid side that we are getting might be way better over on a sorceress, or it might be way better on a pathfinder. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how this game is there's no limits to what you can do per se, whereas a lot of other ARPGs, you're very limited to, oh, you can only do this with this one character, for instance. Like, you can only shapeshift with the druid in PoE2 as a skill. You have to get a certain item that then allows you to shapeshift. There's like the wolf howl helmet is what the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to Diablo 2, where you can put that on a barbarian and then you can shapeshift into a druid's form, right? Like by the bear form or with the wolf form. Stuff like that, right? So also I will kind of point this out real quick. So my when they talked about shape-shifting to begin with, my expectations was we're getting a druid and a bear. That was like immediate expectations, right? Because that is like the most, I don't know if I want to call it common, but thematically it's the most, like some of the first things you think of. And the fact that they introduced a dragon is absolutely insane to me. It's crazy. And the thing that's crazy about it is, in my wildest dreams, I would never, ever have thought that they would let us shapeshift into a dragon. That's just not even in, that was not, when I thought about shapeshifting, that was never a thing that came to mind at all. Once I heard it though, I immediately went, what in the fuck? Bro, we're getting dragons in PoE 1 or in PoE 2. This is insane. This is crazy. But in terms of league starting, I don't know if I would start a druid personally. I don't think I am gonna do that. What my plan is more starting something that I know will work really, really well, and then from there making some currency, getting some decent gear, and then I'll go make a druid as my second character, for instance, or maybe my third character, depending on how things play out, right? But I don't think I would league start a druid, just in general, because I just don't see that being the best idea for me personally. I'd much rather want to start let's say a ranger or pathfinder, mercenary or something like that, or even the chronomancer if I'm gonna play in a group this league story, right? Because I'm not 100% sure what I'm gonna do, so we'll just have to wait and see. And for the skill changes, there is just so many changes here. There's a ton of fucking buffs. There's a couple of nerfs, and yeah, I don't think that well, I don't want to go into specifics here really because there's too much that's changed. So if you really want to know specific things that has to do with something you like to play, I would very much suggest you go through the patch notes. You find the skills that you really like to play around with, and then you check if those are getting buffed or nerfed. But chances are they're getting buffed. That's how I would look at it, right? Also, so getting into the unique items situation here, I have wrote down a handful of things too, or not a handful. I've wrote down a couple of things, but there's a lot of changes to unique items. We're seeing a lot of buffs to a lot of different unique items, and we're also getting something else, right? So there's two things here. We're getting double corruption, which allows us to corrupt an already corrupted item once more. And we're getting something that we just had in PoE 1, which is called Foulborn uniques in PoE 1, which basically allows you to change a mod on a unique item. So let's say we have a unique item, and it has like a specific downside that makes that unique item not really worth using. You could now technically remove that downside and then gain an upside instead. And now this item went from being a like 1 out of 10 to being a 10 out of 10 or a 12 out of 10 because it's just that one stat changed, and now this item is just absolutely outrageously good, right? There's some different items that immediately comes to mind for me, but that's just one thing about it. And then there is the double corruption where you can get a different implicit, but also the fact that basically you can corrupt an item, you get an increase of the modifiers, right? If you're lucky, you can get up to 1.22 times whatever the modifier is. So that could be really interesting because you can have that happen twice in a row, basically, making some items really like strong, basically, right? So I kind of want to highlight two things here, to be fair, if we think about it. So just to like quickly go over it. So we're getting a buff to the shield, the Chaos Trial shield that you can drop, which started out at like 600 something % increased of your soul cores, and then it went from 600%, or it was over 600%, down to 100%, and that killed that item. Honestly, that absolutely just murdered that item. And then we went from, and now we're going from basically 100% up to a maximum of 333%. The thing is that you can corrupt that, right? So you could get the 1.22 like times 333, and then you could get then you get that result, right? And then afterwards you get that same result again, but now it's times the new number, so it goes even higher. So we could see, so first corruption could give us basically a 400%, right? So I didn't even do 1.22. I should have done that, sorry. So we'll do 333 times 1.22 equals 406%. Now it's corrupted, and you can then go corrupt it once more. So if we go like this times 1.22 equals, now we're at 500% almost. This is close enough to what it was if we look at my current one right here. So, it went up to 666. Okay, fair enough. But this is corrupted, and it increased, as you can tell. It kind of increased because it's only a 411%. No, sorry, it's a 6. Oh, you can't even see. Okay, sorry, that's my bad. You can't even see that. I don't remember the original number fully. I do not, since it says 100 here, I can't tell what the original one was. But you can tell, like, this is 600% increased, right? So I have 2 all-res soul cores in here, which gives you 5 all-res per soul core. And with those increases, that is giving me 70% all resistance, which for a curse bot like mine, which has these rings on, that gives me -20 to all resistance, which is then enhanced by the ingenuity. Now I'm getting like a lot more minus all resistance, but this then counteracts that immediately. So that works out really, really well for something like this. So I could see a massive comeback of this shield, which is a good thing. Honestly, that's a good thing, because I don't feel like the rewards from the Chaos Trial was that good. They kind of felt a little lackluster, except for maybe Adorned, I would say. But even Adorned wasn't like the best of the best. Which is basically the second thing I want to highlight here, is the Adorned Jewel is getting a massive buff too. And when I say a massive buff, I actually mean like a gigantic buff, right? So up until now, it was increasing your corrupted magic jewels by 100%. That is now getting changed to 150%. But here's the thing that makes this even crazier. You can now take the Adorned and you can corrupt it again, right? Because it drops corrupted, but that's only corrupted once. So you can now corrupt it again, right? So now you could get the 1.22 modifier. So you add like 150 times 122 is like 180, like something like that, 180, maybe 185 or something. So 100, let's say 180% increase on your magic jewels, right? Like, so if you had a magic jewel, in my case, what I would really use it on, to be fair, is on my Bannerman, right? Because then I could have a jewel on my banner guy that has increased glory generation, which is my biggest issue with the build currently. But this kind of fixes that problem, if you ask me. This kind of gives it allows for so much more glory generation that now you might actually be able to place the banner consistently all the time, which is what my complaint about that was. And I don't mind them nerfing it. I just mind when there's no when there's no way to regain that by gearing, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't mind them changing stuff. There should just be some kind of way to achieve it at very end game, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I really like this change. This means that the Adorned will now be absolutely, it might be the strongest thing in the game. It's hard to tell right now, but there might be a lot of builds going for the Adorned this time. I could definitely see that. I think that is a big it has a big potential. There's a lot of things you could do with it. There's a lot of ways to make that really, really strong with that kind of increase. So basically, like, a massive juice to that jewel, and that just makes the Chaos Trial now way more like interesting to do, right? Like, because now it's not just getting the 1 or 2 soul cores that's worth a lot. Now there's actually like, okay, if I drop a fucking good Adorn and then I go corrupted and it becomes even better, you know what I mean? Like, now we are making divines. And the shield itself too, right? Like, you go corrupt that, you end up with like a 500% increase. That is going to be worth so much divines. There is no way that's not going to be worth like a ton of divines. So that's basically kind of what I wanted to highlight there. But there's one more thing you could say. We have the Darkness Enthroned belt, which you could then corrupt and get over 100% increase on. And now you can corrupt it again and then get even more increase, right? So yeah, that could also go crazy this league, to be honest. Even though we had seen a lot of nerfs per se to the movement speed in terms of, which I'm gonna highlight next here. So we might as well jump right into that, right? So, all right, so to highlight some item changes that's gonna happen here. right? So we have the unique item changes, which is a lot. Definitely go look through the patch notes if you want to know exactly what changes and what items is being changed. But here's some for the non-unique items, right? Okay, so first and foremost, we're getting less plus skills basically on gear, right? So they are removing the essence of sorcery, so we can't. Well, they're changing it so we can't put it on to focuses anymore. So you can't get the +3 all skills on your focus. And I believe they're also changing the essence of battle here, which gives you +6 on a weapon or a crossbow and +4 on a bow. And I think that change alone is kind of good in a way, because this was like too easy of an outcome. I feel like these are too. There's no complexity here. There's no depth here. It's just, oh, what's best in slot in terms of skills? Well, you have to use an essence, and it has to be one of these two essences on your gear to get like the maximum amount of skills on your gear, right? It seems like a little bit too easy to get to, right? And I don't think that the systems should necessarily just be, oh, click this one currency and immediately just guarantee an outcome with everything, right? Like just, oh, no matter which bow or melee build or crossbow build I'm using, I will always just click this and click my bow, right? That seems a little bit dumb. No matter which the focus I want on my caster, I will always just go click this and click this on my focus immediately. That is just like a minute change but it is too easy for me. Now there's another change happening here to the homogenizing, what's it called again? Homogenizing. Omen of homogenizing exaltation. So this is gone, and this is the one of the few things I would call an L in terms of the update, just because I really like this one. I think this one is a perfect example of a good crafting, like a good thing to use for crafting, and it comes as this one as well, where you can use a regal orb and then gain. It will put a modifier of the same type as already existing on the item, and this is basically doing the same but just with an exalt. So the way this is working is you got to understand what the modifiers of an item actually is. If we look at my amulet here that I crafted, which I used the homogenizing for to craft, right? So how did I manage to get spirit, global defenses, 3 projectiles, crit chance, and crit bonus? Well, by looking at these, if you hover over the tiers right here, you'll notice that they have a certain tag. Well, the projectiles doesn't have a tag. So how I started this was with a fractured spirit on there. Then I chaos spam to get my +3 on here. Then once I had the +3, I then went for the suffixes here. So I used a bone, and then I guaranteed the bone to be a suffix, and then I went and revealed a modifier that had a critical tag on there. And getting that modifier then meant when I used an exalt with the homogenizing, then I would get another, since the spirit has no tag and the +3 projectiles has no tag. So those two can't really give me any specific modifier onto this amulet. But the critical has a tag, right? Like critical is a tag, and the only other critical modifier there was for an amulet was crit bonus. So by having one of the crit modifiers from using my bone, I then was able to put on the second crit modifier. So let's say I use my bone, I get crit bonus. I use my homogenizing omen, and then I get critical chance. Now I use an omen of light to remove this one, because I don't really want this as my, like in the final product, I don't want my bone to be as a suffix. And then I have the critical, now I still have the critical tag on here. So when I went and homogenized and exalt again, I got another critical, which the only other critical was critical bonus. I feel like this is not too complicated. It's just a question about understanding what these tags are and actually looking at your gear. And that gear will tell you, everything you find will tell you exactly what the modifier tags are, right? By hovering over it. It says in game. It's not something that's incredibly hard to understand, in my opinion. It might be hard to understand exactly which modifiers is available for a certain item, but that comes down to like time spent on doing these things and then learning. There's like a learning process to that, and I feel like that's fair. I don't like if there's no learning curve. If it's just here you go, here's everything, right? Like that's just stupid to me. But then I have these 3 tags on here, and I have my spirit. And then from that point forward, since the spirit can never change, now it was easy just putting one mod on as the prefix. Any mod would do in this case. And what then happened was I used an essence. Once I had that mod, I used this essence that gives you global defense, which is this. No, it's over here. This one, right? So we use this one on an amulet. It gives us 20 to 30 global defenses, which basically gives us ES, right? Or it gives us evasion rating as well. And this also has a tag. And since there's no critical modifiers that can go in as a prefix, now we can only get a defense modifier here, which is awesome. So technically I could homogenize and get a defense modifier, but what I chose to do, because it was easier to control it this way, was to use the bone, because then I can always just re-roll this modifier to get the tier 1, right? So that's why I went that direction. As you can see, I have tier 4 because I just put it on once and I never bothered to do anything else with it. Once something works perfectly, why would you ever change it, right? Because you can make it better if you want to, but there was no point for me. I rather wanted to build a new build, work on a new build. So just to like kind of explain why I feel like this was such a good item and why I'm kind of sad that it's gone now. I do think that is a little bit sad. I felt like that was a very intuitive way to make certain things happen. Especially when it comes to boots and stuff like that. Also, like you have a pair of movement speed boots, get a resistance on there, and then you can force other resistances on, or you get the defense modifier, and now you can force other defense modifier on that. That just seemed very, for me at least, very easy and intuitive. So I don't quite know why they would chose to go that direction to change that. But here's another thing. Changing the runes, which is what we're going to talk about now, is there is these runes you can put in your gear. Now I'm currently using just a random greater iron right now. I don't even know why I put that in. But I have this one, for instance, which is reduced movement speed penalty. This will be gone from next league. So there is no, like this rune just doesn't exist. And I think that's also a little bit of an L, because this affects more, it almost affects every build. I think most builds would use this if they're using some kind of skill that reduces their movement speed. It's just a no-brainer. Getting 12% less movement speed penalty for one rune when you have the increased sockets, effective sockets on there, was just incredible. In some cases, it was so good that you would actually just put 3 of those in. That was almost better than actually adding the movement speed runes, which is another thing that you could do. But now, the movement speed rune in itself also caught a bit of a nerve, because beforehand you could technically corrupt this and get a 3rd socket, and then you could add, like what I would have done here is corrupt it, add a 3rd socket, then add 2 movement speed runes in here, so we get 10% extra movement speed, and then increasing that with the 100% increased would then mean that we're getting 20% movement speed. Now we'll only be able to put 1 of those in, so you would have to use something different, and you can't use the reduced movement speed penalty, so now you have to use this slot for something completely different, right? But also Another issue with that is if you're relying on the 5 all res soul core, for instance, or maybe you want to use the chaos resistance, or maybe you want to use the attack speed ones, right? Like, it's just a lot of these are now you're only able to put 1 in instead of having 2 if that was necessary to cap out your resistances. I feel like that is a little bit of an L2 just for some builds that really needs those things to like cap out the resistances. That is a little bit of a rough experience. Luckily for me, I have gone in a direction where I've made sure that I used like something different on most things, right? So that way I'm not getting hit as hard from that change with, for instance, this specific build, right? Like, I think that this build won't see much of a change, like in damage, or maybe a little bit on the top end when it comes to like less rods, but when the damage is as high as it is already, I don't feel like that change would affect me very much. I would still be able to just instant burst the bosses. You just want to wait like the 6-second downtime there is for them to take damage, right? Like, if you do that, then you should still be able to just one burst them pretty much. Once the damage is high enough. Of course, you're not going to have the same experience going through the campaign, which is, I think, is a good thing, because being able to instant kill every boss and throughout the campaign is stupid as fuck, right? Like, it's just, if you can one tap every boss and there's no challenge and it's your league starter and you don't even have any gear on, it's a little bit too easy. I do like the challenge. I sometimes, when I go through the campaign, I force myself to play with a lot less gear than what I would be able to. Like, usually, some things I tend to do is not use any gear from my stash. So I really get the feel from going from Act 1 to Act 4, for instance, right? Like, you get the real feeling of the progression throughout that. Or I'll handicap myself and play with worse gear just to feel like how strong is the build actually, right? Can I use like Act 2 gear in Act 4? You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that. We are also seeing a bunch of buffs to the item bases themselves. So what that means is just like a lot of them are getting like a little bit of a change, a bit higher numbers. So Obliterator Bow might change a little bit in comparison to Warmonger Bow, whatever, right? Like those things. I think that's a good change, especially in certain categories where basically shout out to you, Knight, for saying this. Instead of an upgrade, it was a side grade, right? If that makes sense. So instead of the next level or next tier up of base being better than the one that you already have, it might not have been better, right? Like, it might have been kind of a side upgrade. Okay, so I have to pick between this implicit or this higher damage or whatever, right? And that just didn't feel quite as well, or quite as good, especially going through the campaign. Because once you are in end game, it doesn't really matter anymore, right? Like, you're just gonna run through almost everything. So last, I have written down a couple of things about the end game. So we are seeing a little bit of a change here as well. Especially to the micromanagement of having to create maps, which is the thing that I'm most happy about seeing. So something like having to instill all of your maps. It's just it's one of those time eaters that just eats time and doesn't really. It's just eating a ton of time, and it doesn't feel that well. It doesn't feel necessarily that rewarding, right? Like, it does feel rewarding once it comes to playing the actual map, but in crafting them, it's so much micromanagement, having to do, I gotta instill them, I gotta exalt them, I gotta regal them, I gotta add the bone to them, and then now I gotta travel to the abyss place and unveil the bones. It's just a lot of steps to go through to start playing the actual game. Does that make sense? I do like the PoE 1 situation here, where we have the scarabs, and you still have these, like, you can still delirious your maps in PoE 1, But the way it works in PoE1 is just a specific orb which adds a specific currency or a specific reward, rather that be currency or it be a item or something like that, unique item. Maybe it's a rare item, maybe it's armor, maybe it's a socketed item, whatever, right? And it's a lot less micromanaging, because you just go, oh, I only want to get extra currency. And then you have the currency orb, and it's not like, oh, I have to know which 3 I have to put together, or which 2 goes with 1, and stuff like that. You just, oh, I want the currency. You click the currency one, and you just spam all your maps instantly. And it really doesn't take a whole lot of time, right? So that part, I do like that change a lot. They are changing the tablets. I really fucking hope they put a tablet tab in here. They did not say anything about that. They are changing the tablets now, so we can basically take a tablet and then we can upgrade it to rare, and then it has 4 modifiers, I believe it is, and then we can corrupt it on top of that, which is beforehand something you could only really get from doing the Arbiter of Ash, I believe it was. And then that guy would be able to drop you a tablet that was already rolled and rare and was corrupted. But now we're gonna be able to do that ourselves by taking away that distilling and the abyss situation. That, I think that's a positive note, or positive step in the right direction. Do I agree with tablets? Not really. I still think that's terrible in comparison to scarabs. But they are also basically taking down the pack size a little bit here. They're taking down the pack size by 40% in the end game, I believe it is, which is a bit of a nerf across the field if the tablet numbers doesn't go up adjacent to how much that nerf is going to be, right? If the buffs to the tablets aren't equal to the nerfs to pack size, then it does going to feel like there's a bit of a nerf there in terms of the high-end juicing, I would say, right? But I don't necessarily mind that per se, since, well, we still have to do the Arbiter of Ash to even unlock the ability to make our tablets rare. So that is going to be a mandatory thing every league, technically, right? Like kind of like getting your stones for PoE1, you have to that's a mandatory thing in my opinion, right? Like you want to get your 4 stones so you can turn every map into a T16 map instead of only a couple of them are T16, right? So you do want to do the pinnacle bosses like the Eater of Worlds, Shearing Exarch, the Maven, and forget the last one right now. But that, I feel like that's mandatory, and I do think that that's a good choice, honestly, to kind of like put it behind the Arbiter of Ash. So now you gotta have your belt be doing a certain, like performing in a certain way, or you have to basically buy the access by giving somebody like a divine or 2 to carry you through that fight, basically, right? So that contrasts into making something worth actually doing. Now you can do the Arbiter of Ash and sell the curries for it and carry people through it, and we know how that works with like stuff like Chaos Trial or the Trial of the Sechamus, and that's a very profitable way to go about it, and you can actually make quite a bit of currency doing that. So really like that. I think that's a good idea. So also they have nerfed like the top end, right? And then they've basically raised the low end, right? So when it comes to the mods on the tablets, they don't really. It didn't seem like the mods on the top end was getting like a bunch more, but you can just have more modifiers on the tablet, which having more modifiers means more juice, right? But the numbers themselves didn't seem like they were going up on the top end. But on the low end, though, they were going up. A lot of them was getting literally doubled or more, which is breaching the gap. So that's why I think it's good, right? Like, this is gonna breach the gap a little bit between the highest end of juicing versus the regular or like lower end of juicing, right? Because right at this moment in time, the gap between low-end juicing and high-end juicing is so massive, in my opinion. Like, it's gigantic. It's absolutely incredible, the difference. And the example I'm going to use here is, so if you play on a full team and you have a rarity bot and you're using 150 delirious maps, 150% delirious maps, versus somebody who's playing solo on, like, let's say 36% delirious map, the difference in drop rate and how much loot you accumulate over time is just night and day difference. It's astronomical how much more loot you get when you're playing in a group with a rarity bot on 150 delirium maps. It's you can't even compare that. It's so extreme, that disparity between those two groups. It's absolutely ridiculous that the group play is so much better than solo play. I'm not saying they should bring solo play to a point, the same point that group play is in. I'm just saying you do gotta kind of decrease the gap a little bit, because this is the difference between being like a multi-billionaire versus like earning 50,000 a month, right? Like that's literally the difference in terms of drops. And I do want to see them kind of just. I don't necessarily think they should nerf the top end. I just think they should bring the bottom up to be more in line. I don't feel like it is right now. I feel like when you're doing low end juicing, it's just when you're a casual player, right? That's how I view it. Not that I am necessarily a casual player or anything. I'm just viewing it that way. If you are a casual player, and you then, let's say you play for 2 months, and then randomly somebody invites you into a group, and you get to play with a full group, and then you experience what that's like versus what you've just been doing for 2 months, you feel like what the fuck, I made more currency in 1 week than I did in 2 months of playing by myself. That's I feel like that should get just cut down a little bit, so it's not nearly as extreme as it has been. But I still think that they shouldn't necessarily nerf the top end of loot. That's something that I feel like a lot of people would feel bad about if they just cut it down, right? But it's also so. The problem, really, honestly, to be fair, in my opinion, the massive issue here is that this tree is just not providing quite the same type of specific ways to juice stuff as it is in PoE 1, if that makes sense. In PoE 1, this tree is like 10, 15 times bigger, right? You get 150, 115. Is it 115? I think it's 115 points, right? Yeah. So basically triple the size of this tree. You can kind of imagine what that would look like if this tree was 3 times as big and you had 3 times the points, right? Like that would just be a lot more ways to specialize into certain things. If you really want to see a lot of monsters and you want to have a lot of pack size, then you get it off of this tree. That's not just common. Like every map has that fucking crazy amount of monster spawn, so you can't play anything but the ranger, alien, whatever, lightning spear, spark, whatever, like massive AoE that just instant kills the whole screen, stuff like that, right? It kind of provides a little bit more. And that's what I feel like PoE 1 has done to perfection, right? You can play stuff that doesn't necessarily has gigantic AoE or clear speed or whatever. You can play something that just stands still right here and does a little bit of, has a little bit of AoE, but does a shit ton of damage. So anything that runs into you just instantly die. And then you have a mechanic that, let's say like Ritual, for instance, that spawns a bunch of enemies and they all run straight towards you. They all die immediately, right? That would feel more rewarding that way. But if you're not able to do that, and you can only do it by having like a massive AoE and killing the whole screen instantly, but just boom, 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 you're killing the whole screen, then there's just a ton of builds that's going to feel lackluster. It's just not going to feel good to play them. And that's like, we can take PoE 1 for instance. Like a good example here would be doing the ultimatum and having the cast on stun chieftain, for instance. And you're just standing in the middle of the circle, and you don't even have to touch the keyboard, and it does it by itself. Or Simulacrum, you just stand there and it just does it by itself, right? It's just, I feel like there should be room for that kind of flavor where there's like, oh, I like to do this, or I rather want to do this. And Mark did say this, like, this sucks. This tree sucks. That's his words, and I agree. Yes, it does suck, but on one hand, it's early access. We cannot expect to have 10 years worth of development put into this game day one. That's impossible. Because then it would be just straight up copy pasting PoE 1 and just giving it new graphics, and that would be it. And I don't think that's a good way to go either. I think they should slowly over time, they process this, make it bigger, and take inspiration from PoE 1, the places where it's needed, and then creating and crafting new things in other places where it feels better to have something different in PoE 2. That is what I want to see personally. So that was basically my breakdown of the patch notes. That is literally, I feel like I went over most of the things that really matters here. This is a long video, I know. That was a long ass amount of patch notes, I'm not gonna lie. It's like that was really a lot to go over and to read, and I didn't have to just, I read it on stream just for the people who just wanted to sit there and listen to it, and I then afterwards had to read it like 3 or 4 times to go through everything to really understand like certain things, or go look at how the game is now, how is the things now exactly, and then look at the patch notes to kind of figure out, oh, okay, that is actually more of a change than I thought it would be, and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoy this breakdown of the patch notes. This is basically just a summary of the things that matters to me mostly. Then there's a bunch of, as I said, skill changes, unique item changes, other item changes, a bunch of different things. As I said, like one of the biggest item changes is now, like basically from here downwards, it's gonna be a maximum of 1 per item, I guess. I don't think it's 1 per build, it's 1 per item. So, but you can't really wear 2 body armors, right? So it's pointless. But you could wear a belt, the Darkness Throat, that's like a body armor, and you can put this in your body armor, and you can put that in one of the belt slots, and then you have to find another thing that you want to put in there instead, and we have to mix and match that in a way now that's a little bit different. I don't know if that's going to be a W or an L in the end. It might be a W, it might be an L. That's something we just have to play around with and test. As I said, there's a lot of these things that really has to be played and tested until we can really tell the true impacts that it will have. Yeah, that is gonna be it for this video. As I said, I'll leave a link for the patch notes in the description if you guys want to go check it out for yourselves. And that is it for me, man. Have a good day, good evening, whatever it might be for you. And as always, I will catch you all in the next one.